Hey y'all, what's going on? My name is Rosie, and I have a couple of things I want to talk about today. I have them written down, so let me reach my paper. The first thing I'm going to talk about, obviously, is the shooting that happened in Texas yesterday, May 24th. Those babies and that teacher or those teachers are supposed to be getting ready for summer vacation. They're not supposed to be getting ready to be buried. And there are politicians, there are obviously a lot of famous people who are just asking politicians, when is it going to stop? I am so sick of hearing about school shootings, and then in Texas, instead of, gun reform or, making some kind of rules, get some kind of rules set in place to make it harder for people like that to get guns, they relax the gun laws. People can carry concealed weapons without a permit. And it's just like, how is that the answer? I mean, the answer to somebody coming into school and killing your babies is to sell more guns? How does that even make sense? And when is it going to stop? And I don't care how many times these people send their thoughts and prayers, or their heart and prayers, or their condolences. That's not going to bring those people back, those innocent people who lost their lives. The first school shooting I remember hearing about was Columbine. And then before that, there was a girl shooting kids from her house saying that she didn't like Mondays. From then until now, when does it end? When does it stop? How do we stop this? What are you going to do about it? And we are getting angry. It's like to the point where you can't even be sad anymore. Of course, there are people sad, but I can't even be sad anymore. I get pissed off every time I hear about another school shooting, because it makes no sense. It shouldn't be happening anymore. This is 2022. I mean, like, what? And nothing's being done. Nothing is being done. And so it's gotten old. It's still tragic. It's enraging. It's infuriating, but nothing's being done. Okay, another thing I was triggered by was I just happened to be reading about Aretha Franklin and found out that her dad in the 1930s or 40s impregnated a 12-year-old girl. He raped this poor girl, got her pregnant, and she had the baby. Baby's name is Carl. It's a girl. It's a little girl. Her name was Carl. And sadly, she passed away a few years ago. And when she had the baby, she was separated from her infant daughter, and her parents put her out of her house. She was shunned by her church, but yet she was the one who was victimized. I found out that Aretha Franklin left that girl's daughter $50,000 in her will. Excuse me. She was left $50,000 in her will, but sadly, she passed away too. I think she died in 2018, 2019, somewhere in there. And the family didn't really acknowledge her that much, but Aretha did. Shows what kind of woman she is. And so there's that. I was pretty pissed about that, finding out that her dad was not only a womanizer, but impregnated a 12-year-old girl. And instead of helping her, instead of reaching out to her, instead of getting that baby some help, her parents put her out church yonder, and I tried to find out what happened to her, what's her history, if she was maybe okay somehow, but I can't find any information on her beyond that. And I brought that up because of this. There's a pastor in, I think it was Indiana, and his name is Pastor John Lowe II. And he got in front of his church and gave this heartfelt speech that he committed adultery over 20 years ago, and that it went on for far too long. His words now, that it went on for far too long. And the reason he didn't tell anybody is because he was hoping to protect her family and all those closest to her from it, or from the news of it or whatever. And he said that he was trying to protect himself as well. And he said that he admitted all of this to his wife and his family, and they graciously forgave him. He's stepping down from his pastoral duties and whatever else is going to go on. Well, to his detriment, the woman in question stood up, took the microphone, and gave the real story. The real story being that her brother came to her and admitted to her what he saw when he was a teenager. I think he was older than her. And what he saw was that pastor in her bed. Most likely it was against her will, because she was only a 16-year-old girl. And he took her virginity from her on the floor of his office. And she said that she had been abused and just hurt by this. And she was disgusted by him because he wasn't telling the full truth. And, people were, of course, angry about it. She was definitely angry about it, and her husband was angry about it. And you could just hear in her voice just how angry and disgusted and infuriated she was, and rightfully so. As she stood in front of that church telling him, you need to tell these people the truth. You need to tell them what really happened. And if you won't, I will. And some other things that she said. And I'm only paraphrasing. I was pretty triggered by that, as well as the C.L. Franklin story. And hearing stories like that is part of the reason that I don't go to church anymore. I have not been to church since the November after Thanksgiving in 2010. That Sunday, I went to church that morning because Mama made it like a rule that if we were going to live with her, we were going to go to church. And so I complied. I had no choice. But that night, they were going to have some kind of a program at the church. And because two other people who lived in a hotel down the street from us, since they wanted to go and there wouldn't be enough room in the car for me, I didn't have to go to church that night. And from then on, I never stepped foot in another church. My mom had since left the church because the pastor there was pretty shady. I won't give his name, but I had heard stories of him having sex with a woman, one of his congregants, on the floor in the sanctuary of his church. The church used to be a juke joint, but that's neither here nor there. He had gotten caught having sex with her. And my mom said that because of that, that church had become cursed ground. And I guess that's like a consecration or something. I have to look that up. I don't know what the word is called, but he just basically it made it filthy, so to speak, and it was no longer blessed ground because of what he did. And there are just so many other reasons. Every church that my mom had ever been to, she was mistreated in those churches because they were jealous of her gifts, because she was a prophetess and she could tell people what had been going on in their lives without them even talking about it, and then tell them some things that were going to happen for them. And then they would come back later and tell her those things happened and they felt so blessed and that she was real. And so she was a prophetess. And you don't have to believe that. That's fine. I don't need your BS telling me that it's all lies. And I just know what I saw, okay? So anyway, she left that church and then she went to another one. I don't know what the church was called. I don't know who the pastor was. I never stepped foot in that church. As far as I know, it was in somebody's house, and she went there for a little while. And then because of some things that had gone on, she left that one. And that was back in 2012 or so. And from then until the time she passed away in 2019, she didn't find another church to go to. She had gone to church as a visitor at my uncle's church, I think, and then at another church probably, but she didn't become a member. And she had plans of joining a church and making us go with her, but that never came to pass. I don't have any plans of joining another church. If I do, it'll have to be a church that I choose and a church that I feel comfort in, and someplace where I feel I can pray and my prayers will be answered. But it cannot be something that somebody chose for me. I'm not doing that anymore. What bothers me about the John Lowe II, okay, some of his congregants went up to the stage, and after he went up there, after the woman spoke, he goes, "I admitted that I committed adultery." Dude, she was a 16-year-old girl. And so somebody who was, I guess the person holding the camera, said, "You didn't say it was a 14-year-old girl." And he goes, "I'm sorry, she was 16. Dude, that doesn't make it any better. She was 16 years old and you were 38, old enough to be her dad. So adding 2 years onto a teenage girl does not make it any better, especially when she says she was hurt by this, she was abused by you. So pastors, to me, how many of them are on this earth leading their people astray? If he goes up there and he repents and asks forgiveness and all of this, I guess, whatever, but there's no way that I could go up and embrace him and go, "Oh, it's okay, and you ask for forgiveness and we have to forgive you." I cannot do that. Why? Because I was raped as a young child. I was raped at 4. I was molested at 8. I was molested at 11. I was molested at 13. I was raped at 18. So I cannot just sit here and pretend to be okay with what he did just because he said sorry. I don't hate the guy, but at the same time, I would not support him. I would immediately, if I were a member of his church, I would immediately stop going. Because there's no way I can stand by and support something like that, knowing what happened to me as a child, knowing that he hurt a child. And the same with the people at C.L. Franklin's church to shun that little girl. She's just a child, a baby, 12 years old. And her pastor, who she trusted, who she was supposed to feel safe with him, he hurt her and he impregnated her. And she was not the only preteen girl that he pursued and preyed on. And the church people shunned her as if it were her fault. Like, how does a 12-year-old girl, they act as if she was some kind of a Jezebel or some kind of a sex worker or something. They shunned her from the church. Her parents threw her out of their home. Her parents, her fucking parents, threw her out of the house. They separated her from her own baby that she was probably forced to have, because Black people back in those times, they didn't have the means to get an abortion, not unless it was an illegal one that would hurt them. So because of her victimization, she was turned away instead of helped. And this is the church community that's all across America. Like, this is still going on. Pastors preying on children, little girls, little boys, just being preyed upon and hurt and not helped. And I'm angry about it. I'm triggered by it, and I'm disgusted. What happened in Texas, I'm disgusted by it, and I'm tired of it. Somebody needs to do something, but nobody does anything. And I just want to know, when does it stop? When does it all end? Because it's gotten out of hand, and somebody needs to step up and say enough, no more. But nobody will. So anyway, I'm gonna go. That's all I wanted to talk about. That's all I have on my mind, and I hope to see y'all on the next upload. Bye for now.